Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of TurboShed, and in this one we're on the dyno. We're going to turn it up to 11. Yes, here we are everybody. We hired out the Dyno Dynamics dyno at John Sleeth Race Cars, and we got John with his knock ears, and we decided we've got to get the car in here and we are going to map it up as far as we possibly can until something stops us going further. So simply we put it on the dyno first using our base setup. So we have a 10 psi spring in the wastegate. We started off at 10 psi and we just go through the same process over and over on the dyno here, and we make sure that firstly the closed loop's turned off on everything. We run the air fuel ratios to get those correct, and then we add ignition timing whilst looking at the dyno plots to see what it's doing and whilst listening for knock. And once it's happy in that area, we went up in 3 psi increments. Now we started off at 10 psi and our plan was to run it up in this set of runs up to 18 psi, and that would allow us to stop and to change the wastegate springs so we could go a lot higher later on. So we had a pretty simple setup. John sat in the driving seat, he ran the dyno and the car, and I sat in the passenger seat and I ran the Haltech on the laptop. So here I am, I'm making the adjustments and looking at other parameters that John can't see on the dyno. So simply we'd do a pull, we'd have a discussion, change the AFRs, change the boost control duty and change the ignition timing. Then we'd do another pull, have a look at the results, and we just follow that process through. So the very first run of the day, 10 psi, we made 360 horsepower at the wheels, which I don't think is something to be sniffed at. And as we said, we then just slowly ticked our way through up to 18 and 20 psi so we could change the wastegate spring. So here's a few pulls and then we'll have a look at some of the results from that first session. Here's an example of some of the live data overlaid. You can see some of the things that I was looking at while we were doing this, making sure things like fuel pressure, injection duty, RPM, air fuel ratios and such like are okay, and to see what the boost pressure is doing versus target pressure.
So after our first set of pulls, we have managed to make 536 horsepower at the flywheel and 650 foot-pound of torque at 18 psi of boost. We haven't even turned it up and we're making over 600 foot-pound of torque. It's insane. We've smoothed out the air fuel curves and we put another 10 degrees of timing in it, so we were extremely conservative with where we were and running sweet as a nut. So we've got to change the wastegate springs now and turn it up even more.
It's pulling 650 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000 RPM, which is insane. There's no wonder that this knocks the tyres off in any gear.
That's why you can set off the line, clutch kick it off the line in fourth.
Yes, so that's it. We're going to change the wastegate spring now because it's only got a 7-pound spring in. We can't go any further. We're going to put a 17-pound spring in, or actually a 10 and a 7, and then we're going to continue turning it up.
Let's hope the rods stay in place.
It'll be right. It's sounding good, it's running nice, temperatures are good, happy days.
Hopefully we've got some big flames.
Right,
I've heard some.
Let's go and get those springs. So it's quite an easy job to change the wastegate springs. You just unscrew the top of the wastegate with a spanner that comes with it. The only problem being, even though we'd let the car cool down for 10 minutes, everything was still extremely hot. So we're putting 2 springs in. So the 10-pound spring's already in. We put the 7 in through the centre of that, and that gives us a 17-pound combined weight. Now the other problem is that trying to compress a 17-pound spring and be able to get the aluminium nut on, which is a very fine thread so easy to get crossed, it's really a 2-person job. Somebody's got to hold the wastegate down for you. You can see John pressing on the hammer here because again it was hot, and I managed to get the ring started. Anyway, we got it done. Back on the dyno. Because we've changed the spring, I needed to remap the boost controller output duty because that was going to be out by the £7 we put the spring in for. So I adjusted that map back on the dyno, and we started our runs from 18 psi, and we're just going to work up in £3 increments until something happens and we can't go any further. So we worked our way up through 18, 21, 24 psi, but we started to find at 24 psi, and on this couple of dyno runs you might pick it up around 4,000, which is peak torque where the engine's working their hardest. We started to detect a misfire. So our first issue came up, and it was time to do some investigations. Well, here we are, we're having a bit of a break. We made at 24 psi of boost, we've got a problem in that it's blowing the spark out, so we're going to have to change the plugs. But at the moment we're here, we're making 510 horsepower at the wheels, which I'm not sure what that equates to the flywheel. I don't know, it's well into the 600s, but anyway, we are going to change the spark plugs, and then we can run it up more, because the spark plugs that I ordered never turned up in time, so we had to bring it with the old ones, and they're looking a bit manky. So anyway, we're going to change the plugs and turn it up some more. So we're going to put a set of BCR8 EISs in, and we'll give those a go. So with the plugs changed, I also adjusted the dwell table. So instead of having dwell as a function of RPM and voltage, I changed it to be boost and voltage. So it meant that at higher boost levels we can put a lot more dwell in, which will help the spark as well. But when you're driving along at normal road conditions, you don't have a massive amount of dwell, which usually cooks the coils. So it was back onto the dyno, 24 psi, do a couple of pulls and see what we get this time with the new plugs in. So after those runs, you can see here that we picked up 25 horsepower at the rear wheels just by changing the plugs and adjusting that dwell. So that's it, onwards and upwards, misfire gone, more boost.
So we've run out of ECU manifold pressure. We've hit the limit on the ECU. Not the turbo, not the fuel pumps, not the injectors, not the spark plugs even. The ECU's run out. So we're just having a look at the plugs right now, and then we're going to scroll through the data, see what we've got, and it's as far as we can go because the ECU's given up.
Well, we're finished. We've got a 29 psi manifold air pressure sensor built into the Haltech, and we've run along between 28.5 and 29 psi, so we cannot put any more boost into the car. We've put about 14 degrees of ignition in higher up, and it's taken that very nicely. It's run great, it's not knocking, and it's consistent. It's putting out, at the wheels we've been running about 540 horsepower, which equates to 630 odd at the flywheel, a bit lower than we thought, but the thing is the power's dropping off a lot. But actually what we get is this top line here. This isn't the power, this is the torque, and about 3,800 revs, it's putting out 800 foot-pounds of torque, which is ridiculous. John did say, is this a diesel? And the thing is that the torque curve actually starts to drop off from about 4,500 revs, which we think is either a function of the cams or the intake manifold or a combination of both. So fuel pressure's good, the turbo's good, everything's running right. It's responded exactly how we wanted, but putting more boost into it would be pointless because we need to sort out either the cams or the inlet manifold next, and then it'll probably make another 150 horsepower.
It was making what? I mean, it only made about 20 horsepower with 5 psi more, didn't it?
Yeah.
Between 24 and 29 it made about 10 horsepower, so we're obviously out of air.
So that's it. So okay, I'm afraid that our claim of 750 horsepower was a little optimistic, but we're not far off.
With a set of cams.
With a set of cams we'll do that. So anyway, we're not quite at 750. Okay, fair play, we hold our hands up, but we think that 800 foot-pounds of torque is not rude.
It's not rude.
And we'll come back next time. However, Mr. Cooper, with your username, which we'll put here,
yes.
I think you bet us $1,000 that it didn't make more than 400 horsepower. Well, I think we did that on the second run of the day, and it turned right down. So our PayPal address is there if you'd like to send us the $1,000, and then we'll go and spend it on cams and bring it back here again.
And then get 700 on the wheels out of it.
That's all. We'll see you next time, where we're going to be doing something else. We might go to the drag strip next, see what it'll do, and
then a set of cams.
We will probably turn it up further again. We'll see. Cheers everybody, thanks
Cheers.
for watching.